Hey guys, it's Thomas with GP Suspension. Right now we're going to be installing a set of cartridges and R bagger forks, but this is the correct install video for Dynas and other 49mm Showa forks. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is we're going to throw our fork in the vise so we can crack the fork cap loose. So I've got that just snug enough. And I'm going to put a little bit of heat into this because these do get torqued pretty strongly. They don't necessarily have Loctite in them, but I always plan like they do. So here we go. Heat gun works too. MAP gas is, you don't really need to run it very fast. I usually just like to warm it up to where it builds up condensation and then burns it off. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our 19mm axle tool or any type of 19mm Allen. And I'm going to use my 22mm wrench for the other side of this thing and hold the fork itself just to make sure that I can break it free. Now this thing is actually wanting to turn, so what I'm going to do is smack it just to break that initial amount of torque free first, so that way I'm not just putting even pressure into it to where it's more likely to break on the vise, slide on the vise than anything else. You have to remember that these things have a ton of preload on them, so when you're loosening it up, it doesn't hurt to have a rag on it because it's going to want to shoot your tool, your wrench, and the fork cap, 15 feet into the air. So you got to be careful about it. So I'm putting pressure into the top of the fork cap right now. And there it was. It was a good amount of preload. That's how much is in there. It's a lot of pressure. You got to be semi-ready for it. So I am going to go ahead and take this out of the vise. So there we go. Letting the spring fall out. I'm going to pump it so the cavity between the inner tube and the outer tube is dry, or as dry as possible. I'm going to put my adapter / spacer back into the caliper carrier ear, tying it back down. I'm going to use this opportunity to pick the circlip out of the top of the lower, taking great care not to drag any sharp metal parts against our fancy inner chrome tube. Don't want to damage it, because that would suck. So the next thing we got to do is we got to take our 12mm Allen to remove the bottom bolt or the retention bolt out of the blower. Make sure you're ready for a little bit of a bath. Actually, it's not going to be so bad. You can pull up on the chrome tube to hold the inner from spinning, so you can unthread this. But they like to use, Harley likes to use Loctite and silicone and all kinds of stuff on these inners. So it might be a bit difficult. You might have to put the spring back in. So I'm going to use my small force impact to break it free, because usually that's enough. I'll apply upward pressure into the chrome tube just to get that fastener out. And when it lets go, the chrome tube will want to shoot up, so I got to be careful. There we go. And then, as you saw, I came pretty close to giving my tool a bath. So just beware that if you have to do that, it's probably going to get some oil on some stuff. So now we can remove our inner tube. There's a tight spot on these that you got to be aware of. So I'm just working it past that spot and not pulling that out of the way. Now I note here that the bottom out cone stayed on this stem here, on the dampening stem. So what I'll want to do is actually knock that off and drop the dampening stem out of the other side. We're not reusing either of them, so there shouldn't be anything inside of the lower And this would be the opportunity, or this would be the time to where you'd clean this off, go throw that into your lathe or your mechanism for removing this bottom out cone. Usually what we do is we machine this lip off. They stamp this lip on over the bottom out cone, and that allows, once you remove that, it allows us to punch out this inner bottom out cone and continue with our install. But in this specific situation, since this is for our personal bike, we've got a set of chrome tubes that we've already modified and we've gotten coated, and they're going to look trick for this. So we're going to use those instead to do this install. But I'll still go and do this modification for you real quick on the lathe, so you can see specifically what we do when we do this. The specific reason we modify it is so our seal head can pass through the chrome tube. If you don't take out that bottom out cone, it won't pass, and you will have a synthetically low amount of travel. It'd be a big question mark, and it won't feel right, and it's not necessarily what you want. But as you can see, this tube is blue, so we're stoked about this. This is something we're putting together for our own specific bike. So with anodized parts and coated parts, DLCs, you want to be careful on how you're clamping these things down. You want to take a little bit extra care not to scratch them, not to drop them, because they do have a surface tension inside the coating that you have to be cognizant of. So I've got these set aside right now. I've got my forks here, and I have the box that has my new coated chrome tubes. We're putting a 2-inch over kit into these bagger lowers. So with the 2-inch over kit, we have to also purchase a outer tube that is the correct length, which is 24 7/8, which you can get on our website along with our fork seals, our tools, and our cartridge kit, along even oils too. So you can get all of those things online at the same point of checkout with our cartridge kits. So let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do is I've got my right fork leg out. I've got it disassembled already. The compression side still has to get disassembled and drained, but we'll do that. We'll just do one thing at a time here. So I've got my rebound leg. I know it's my rebound leg because the holes are on the bottom and the fork cap says rebound on top. So put that guy down into there. I've already made sure that this is clean, that there's no debris in there, nothing that can get sucked into these holes on the rebound side and hold the shims open, which would cause a lack of control. So cleanliness is super important when it comes to doing these installs. Anything that could be floating around inside the oil can and will end up inside the piston holding shims open. So you want to make sure everything is as clean as possible. I'm going to grab the bolt that I pulled out when I was disassembling the fork. I'm going to put my new crush washer on the bolt, and I want to make sure that a crush washer came out and is in my drain pan, which it's not because these are pretty new forks, and I'm going to go ahead and guess that they have silicone on the threads, and that's also something that is stuck to the underside of the lower. If we were to just put a second crush washer into here or reuse the old crush washer, there's a chance that it will leak. We don't want that. So I want to make sure that we only have one crush washer installed. So I'm going to go with my pick tool and probe around up there. And if you can visibly see it, then you want to take it out. I'm actually going to pull this off the vise. So I'm going to take my pick here and just pry out. You should be able to get it out. There we go. There we are. So we got it out. It's getting held in by silicone. So make sure you get the original one out. Put your new crush washer onto your bolt. Go ahead and get this guy back installed inside the vise. I'll probably use the lower ear for this so I have a little bit more working space under the lower. I'm also going to spray this out one more time with my Maxima suspension clean and make sure there's nothing floating around inside of there. So cartridge body back into the lower. get my bolt threaded into the bottom of it, and I will not use my impact to start the thread because we don't want to cross thread this thing. I'm just going to hold it like this. This keeps it simple. I'm turning it on the cartridge side because it's a little bit easier for me. You can do whatever you'd like. All right, it's snug. So I'm gonna hit my little impact and just do a quick little buzz. And then I'm going to torque it to the factory setting, which is about 20 Newton meters on this diameter of a bolt. All right, just function testing. Now I'm gonna assemble my fork tube. With these special coatings, you want to make sure when you're initially installing them that you grease up the whole thing. You just want to make sure it's lubricated, that anything, when you have a new set of forks, there's really small machine marks that are sharp. So the best thing you can do is just grease them and go ahead and wipe them all over. So when you're pushing the new bushings on, it will wear any sharp edges. Or if you're pushing your O-ring, your new oil seal on, any sharp edges will be less sharp because the fissures between them will be filled with grease, and as time wears, or as time goes on, those sharp edges will smooth out. And usually it just takes one greasing, and by the time that the thing's installed and you're putting them on your forks, they're already fine. It's a cautionary thing that we always do when we're installing new fork tubes. So I'm going to grab my GP oil seals, and I don't need to do the Ziploc bag trick, but I'll show you how to do it just in case we want to be a little extra and install them that way. I'm going to go ahead and take my oil seal, and I'm going to grease the inner lip of it. Set that aside. I'll do my other one because why not be ready? I get to do this all at once. So I'll take my fork, make sure there's not any hair or anything foreign on there that would end up inside of the cartridge. Go and slide that down the tube. It should feel very smooth going down at that point. So I'm going to take my oil seal, flex it over. That's what you would do. Just start on one end, apply pressure towards the end that isn't over the lip yet, and slide it down. Or you can take your Ziploc, a corner of a Ziploc bag or grocery bag, and put the oil seal the correct orientation. The side that has more volume in it of the seal itself goes towards the fork. The dry side of the seal doesn't have, on our seals, it doesn't have a spring on it. So you slide that down. You would take your 49mm fork seal driver and slide it down. I'm going to go ahead and lift this guy up all the way because that'll be a point of which the fork doesn't travel with. I'm being very, very cognizant of where the fork seal driver is sliding across this. This is in a position to where the fork would not be traveling over. So I'm going to let it collapse just a little bit so I can get some penetration here, and then just knock it down. That's that. Get my circlip installed. I'm gonna not use that, and I'm just gonna use a pick or something that won't touch the chrome tube, or in this case, the blue tube. I'll just call it that. All right, dust seal time. Get the dust seal on there. Press it on. Give it a quick little stroke there. That'll be good. We have the cartridge installed and torqued. We're ready for oil. You can always stroke the cartridge while you're filling it to help bleed it. But what I'll do is I'll show you my trick if you're having a little bit of issues bleeding the cartridge during an install. What we'll do is we'll fill it higher, a lot more oil than you normally would. You would obviously not want to overfill it, but you would want to fill it to where you can see the oil level close to the top of the adapter. Now that I'm there, take my pull tool, thread it just so I can pick it up and grab it, let go, get rid of the pull tool, thread my fork cap on. Nothing has to be torqued in this specific situation to where I'm doing my quick bleed. And then I'll lift this up. You can see that's how high I have the oil level at right now. It's actually overflowing when I put the fork seal in it. So I'll pick this up, get it right to where the top out spring's starting to engage, thread it to where the oil seal sits into the relief to where it'll hold its own pressure now if I apply pressure. And then I'll compress it. And what's happening is the pressure on the outside of the cartridge is greater than the pressure on the inside of the cartridge on the side that you're having difficulty bleeding. So what you'll do is you press on it, it'll naturally want to balance to an equilibrium, and then you can start stroking it. See, I've already got it bled up, and you can hear it. You just want to keep doing that. You only need to get it started, really. You don't have to get it fully bled when it's like that. Something that's also happening that I haven't mentioned during this, because I wanted to show this trick, was the chamber in between the inner tube and the outer tube is empty. And if we set our oil level without stroking the cartridge, the first time we set our oil level, installed the spring, got everything done, the first time we would compress it, the oil would want to balance out in level between the inner tube, inside the fork's inner tube, and outside the fork's inner tube, which would synthetically drop the oil level on the fork itself. We don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that this gets balanced out before we set the oil level. Thread off the fork cap. Compress the fork all the way. Our oil height for this specific bike is 150. So make sure your probe is set to 150 millimeters. And you would do that by either referencing the scaling on the probe or measuring it with a ruler like I just did. And we're looking for 150 millimeters of oil height there. So I have that out. I'm going to put my spring guide in, or my spring spacer in, drop that in, but not so far away that it just makes a big splash and gets oil everywhere. Oh, oil level's set, but wait, I want to double check that this is right. Spurt that off. All right, we're good. And you've got a little bit more out of it. So now we are going to get our pull tool, our GP pull tool. So you have good thread engagement because you're going to be pulling against the top out spring here. You're going to grab your spring. You're going to grab your spring and you're going to drop it down. But here's a quick note about springs and the sides for forks. In the industry, the standard is if you have a single function fork, which we do in this case, the rebound side goes on the right. So if you take it to a tuner or you take it to another guy, they know which side does rebound. Also, your fork cap indicates which side your rebound is, right? Because they always get mated to each other. So an important thing to remember is that when you order your kit, you put in your riding style, you put in your weight and your preferences. We customize specially to you a setup specifically for you. That's what brings our level away from everybody else as we dial your bike in specifically for you. So a lot of the time you'll end up with 2 different rate springs, which is normal and it's okay. They're close in tension, so it's all right. But the one thing you need to remember is if you're doing an install and you have 2 different tensions, you want to put the stiffer spring on your rebound leg. So in this case, we have a 1.2 and a 1.1. In this, I'm going to put the 1.2 into my right fork leg, which is my rebound side. So I've got my pulling tool on. I'm going to grab my spring jacker and just real quick, I'll throw that on. I'm going to grab my flat wrench. The flat wrench has 2 sides, the side that has the hole, which is a 17mm, and the side that does not have a hole, which is a 19mm. Slide the 19 to the edge of the spring jacker, make sure it would go further if I wanted it to, and then pull up the top out, or pull up into the top out spring, the cartridge, and the cap adapter. But real quick, just so you see what I'm sliding the tool onto, this is the relationship. You're sliding it into this position so you don't pull this, let go of this and just drop everything and scratches something. You don't want that. So I'll thread that back on. Put our 1.2 on there. Spring jacker. And this is a very critical part when you're doing this install. You are given 3 tools when you purchase a toolkit from us along with your purchase. You get the pull rod, the flat wrench, which is installed right there, and you get a fork cap adapter. This is not the time for the fork cap adapter. When we're tightening the fork cap to the cap adapter with this wrench, you're putting your 14mm wrench onto the preload adjuster and you're tightening it down. A couple things of note here. I get it nice and tight. It's about 12 to 20 Newton meters. You don't want to overdo it because it can damage the anodizing and we don't want that dust getting down into the cartridge. What you also noticed here is when I was tightening it, it was compressing the spring. Every single one of our kits has a 6mm of preload installed. So when you have the preload adjusters unscrewed all the way, there's always 6mm of preload installed inside of the fork when the fork cap is installed. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and slide this guy up, thread it into the fork cap. Tolerances are really good on this, so they're always really good, but there's not a ton of difficulty getting the O-ring past the fork. I'm sorry, getting the O-ring into the chrome tube or the inner tube. Go and spray that down, make sure it's nice and clean. Make sure I'm using a clean rag so I don't scratch it because there's metal debris in there or something silly. I've got that nice and wiped down. And because I'm so cognizant of my brand new tube, which has the special anodizing on it, because we've got a flashy, you know, show bike basically, and we want it to look nice and stay looking nice. I'm gonna snug this up with a rag on my aluminum soft jaws just to start with, and I'm gonna snug up the fork cap. Now it's the time for the fork cap tool. So I'm gonna put my dowels into the holes onto the fork cap. And I'm gonna take my number 24 wrench, holding on to my chrome tube or my inner tube here, and I'm gonna snug it up. So there's that. And then now, last but not least, we're gonna set our fork to its baseline settings. So I'm gonna take a number 3 metric Allen into the brass adjuster at the center of the preload adjuster, and I'm gonna screw it in until I hit a little bit of resistance, which I just met. I'm gonna count out 13 clicks. And that's it. That's the baseline rebound setting for our 25mm cartridge. Now the last thing we're gonna do, or the second to last thing we're gonna do, is we're gonna set our preload. So this is the preload that you can adjust. So right now, I just unscrewed the preload adjuster because you screw in on the brass adjuster and then count out for your setting on your valving or your bypass. And then for the preload, you unscrew and then you count in. So I've got it, it's fully out right now. And I'm gonna turn it in 6 times. And that's that. Something very important to note. If you do not have the fork cap tool and you decide, hey, there's a convenient tool right there that I can just break the fork cap free, you will lock the fork cap. It will not come free again. You will probably have to end up buying a special tool to break the lock nut on the underside of the fork cap, but it is not a fun time. Just make sure you have the correct tools so you can break your fork cap free from the inner tube. So that was the rebound leg cartridge install for the 49 Showa fork for the Dynas and the baggers. The process is exactly the same for the compression side. There's nothing different about it, down to the settings on the brass adjuster and the preload adjuster. So just repeat all the settings. So when you're done with building the cartridge, the forks, you're gonna just make sure it's completely clean. You spray down. And if you're doing any special coatings like this, make sure you've got a brand new, if not really perfect rag that doesn't have anything in it, so you don't scratch it inadvertently. And you also want to clean up here before you go down here, because if there's any brake dust in here, you could potentially scratch it. So, and then the final place that you always want to clean, don't ask me how I know, but is right here. There's always a little bit of oil that sticks around, especially if you've just dumped the original oil out and you're setting this up for a brand new show bike. Now that it's clean, it's ready to install into your bike. Consider your geometry when you're putting everything together. If you just went from a standard length fork set and you're going to a +2 inch fork set like we are, then you're gonna need to have a different set of shocks or a different geometry. That meaning your fork height is gonna be different inside of your triple trees. So plan accordingly, and if you don't know specifically where it should be, give us a call. We've already worked all this stuff out specific to our philosophy and how we think the bike should handle in the middle of a corner. That's where my specific desire and need is to what the bike does in the middle of the corner. So we hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed installing the cartridge kit into the bikes. We're super stoked to get this into our bike. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, give us a call, please. Or stop by our website at gpsuspension.com. Subscribe to this channel if you want more information on new products coming out or the stuff we're up to. Thanks for watching.